So, on today's show, I wanted to make sure and let the parents know I will be interviewing an adult estranged child. His name is Phil. I think it's important to hear uh, what could be going on in one of your kids' lives. So please take it for what it's meant. I would appreciate you hearing what he has to say. Feel free to comment as Phil did. I just want to make sure we keep it, kind and respectful, like we always do. But I know sometimes certain things can trigger us, so I just wanted to preface it with letting you know that this was happening, and let's see where it goes. I do want to speak to more of the estranged children if we find them and they're willing. See if we can help heal some of the families that are out there. So I appreciate it, and stay tuned. Phil will be right up. Hi there, Phil. How are you doing today?
Doing all right. I can't complain.
Cool, cool. So like I said, we'll just go over some stuff and uh, just want to see what your experience has been. I do feel like it, obviously we'll get into your experience, but I do feel like that the more eyes, even on both sides now, that
Mm.
people might see, you might be able to help some of your fellow um, adult estranged children, or maybe the parents can see, oh, maybe that'll spark something. So I do appreciate you coming on. I
Well,
know
thank you.
it's not an easy thing to talk about.
Uh,
So do you want to tell us a little bit about you before we get into all of that?
Sure. Yeah. In my early 30s. Married. Married for almost 8 years.
Awesome.
Met my wife in college. Been together ever since. We have a 2-year-old daughter who's born on Christmas, or
Oh,
she will be two on Christmas.
yeah.
And we're expecting another kid in March. So it's awesome.
That's very
Um,
good.
Yeah, so it's pretty good. I have a younger brother who I
Okay.
see from time to time, um, and work in finance,
Okay.
which is interesting. You know, hustle and bustle of, you know, especially what's going on now. But
Right.
yeah,
Well, I appreciate it. Well, that's exciting news coming up. So your second one coming up. So
yeah,
that's cool.
yeah.
Very good. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Um, are you estranged with no contact, or is it just like a strained, or how would you define it?
Yeah, it's definitely no contact.
Okay.
And the way I kind of grew up is it's a multi-layered issue,
Okay.
and a lot of it stems from my own mother. um, my father to a lesser degree. Um, I and there's also a lot of extended family issues that play as well. So there's a lot of things happening all at once. Um, the short of it is that my mother has a lot of anger issues, and when I mean by anger, I mean like volatile
Oh goodness.
um, anger. Like it could be nothing's going on, and then maybe somebody forgot to wash a dish, and boom,
Boom.
and it's just chaos.
Sure.
Um, it could be anything. Sometimes there's things that are, like anger is not necessarily a bad thing, right? It's not the
Right.
worst. There's things that you should have justifiable anger for, but there were just some decent amount of times where it would just come out of nowhere. And I mentioned my dad to a lesser degree, because my dad would just kind of let those things happen. Um, and also would kind of emotionally dump on me and my brother too. So
Ooh, that's
he
tough.
would, yeah, he would. And like growing up with that, you think that's normal. You don't think that's like the craziest thing at all. And like, because we weren't physically abused,
Right.
um, obviously not in the other arena as well. It was a
Sure.
lot of emotional abuse that you would think is okay. Now, my mother wouldn't do that in public. So she would never really blow up in public, but she did have like she wasn't the happiest, let's put it that way. So some people would be like, "Ew, what's wrong with your mom?
Right.
What's going on there?" And you know, the older I got, the more I realized, hey, this is not normal. This is weird. Um, so and my parents, both of them they they had this thing where they would cut people off themselves, right? So if
Uh,
they didn't agree with something, maybe religious, most generally it would be a religious thing too,
right.
where you don't agree with me on this religious front, cut off, or we disagree with something petty, cutting you off. And a lot of times they do that with family.
Mm,
Um, and my extended family on both sides, well, my dad's side, it's not too bad.
yeah.
But my mother's side, especially, there's a lot of cutting off, a lot of back and forth, petty stuff that goes on. Nobody's talking to this person, that person. My grandmother, she died a couple of years ago, I believe, but I never really had a relationship with her.
Right.
Um, Not because she was necessarily a bad person then, but she was dealing with Alzheimer's. She
Oh,
wasn't
yeah.
really there. She hasn't really been there since I was like mentally there ever since I was like 10 or 12. So we never really had a relationship.
Okay.
So um, come to find out after she died, like a decent amount of her, she's had 6 kids, a decent amount of them didn't come to the funeral.
Mm,
So you've had like, so there's a lot of things happening that I think my mother, and then I don't know about my father, but at least there's a lot of learned behavior of cutting off and volatility from that side of the family that's kind of crept into,
yeah.
uh, my familiar experience.
Yeah.
Um, and I definitely had to work through it once I started going to college. I met with a therapist and started dealing with some
Good.
things and opened my eyes to some things too. And then me and my wife definitely was like,
Comparing.
yeah. So
Yeah. I hear
so yeah,
that.
it's a multifaceted thing. Mostly anger, blowing things out of proportion.
Right.
She tried to tried to ruin me and my wife's wedding. Um, just before when my wife got pregnant with her first kid, there was a blow up again about something that happened years ago that she wanted to bring up. And I called them to tell them, hey, like you're gonna be grandparents, but they messed it up.
Oh,
Uh and that was the kind of the beginning of the end.
yeah.
Like once that happened, I was like, I'm done. So
Understood. By that point, you've been through a lot just yourself,
right,
and now you're trying to break that cycle. I
right.
get that. I've noticed that even talking to other parents, which I don't know how many of them you've listened to, but even talking to other parents, there's a lot of generational estrangement of
Mhm,
varying degrees.
mhm,
So that's unfortunately not surprising.
right,
Um, but
right. And
definitely takes a toll on you
right,
as the child.
right.
So
And I will say I wasn't the best kid growing up either. I was I will say very strong-willed, and it kind of uh, questioned everything to the point where like I would drive my parents crazy. So I'm not saying I was perfect by any means. Um,
no,
um, so I don't want to make light of like, hey, well, you
it was
know,
all them, and I was this
right,
angel. No, I get
exactly, and I could give as much as I could get to, right? So
that.
my mother, she would get mad at some point when I got older. I was like, well, it's already blown up anyway. Why not blow it up even further? It's not the best, again, not the best thing to do.
Right.
But
But
um,
we're all learning this human experience together since the cutoff. How long have you been cut off?
um, 2020, May,
Okay.
June 2020. So
Okay.
just after my birthday.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, that was when we found out we're pregnant with our first kid. We just came back from vacation from this was just before COVID started happening. So
Right.
my wife never has been outside of the country except for Mexico, which no offense to people from Mexico, I don't count that as a outside place. But my dad was in the military, so I grew up.
Oh,
Anytime we left, I grew up outside of the United States.
yeah.
So I grew up in England for a while and Spain for a while.
Oh,
So I
cool.
told like Christina, hey, let's go to like the Mediterranean area and
Yeah.
we can hit some of those spots. So we Did that, and then she was pregnant. So she was
Yeah.
going to tell my parents, but then some. The gist of the issue for that was, um, I went to college. My first college, I went to Connecticut, University of Connecticut, because I did sports.
Okay.
That didn't work out because it was cold. Um, and I'm from the Mid Atlantic, and even I was like, this is too cold for me. I have to get back home.
Yeah.
Uh, so um, came back home. Some of my college was still going to be paid for because of academic stuff, but my parents were willing to pay. And the crux of that issue is that, looking back, is that my parents are sometimes transactional. Um,
Uh,
so, hey, we'll give you this money, but we want you to do what we want you to do, right?
gotcha.
And just which it ducktails into them trying to kind of ruin my wedding. So
Oh
I
man.
I was going to move out the place after college, after graduating. My dad was like, "No, no, don't leave. You can stay here, start working, make and stack some money." That
Right.
sounds great, right?
Sounds
And
good
my
on
mom,
paper.
yeah, it does. It sounds great. And my mom kind of like, she mellowed out a lot. So I was like, that sounds good to me. I can stack my money uh just before wait before we get married, right? So we're not wasting money on like bills, and we can just be set for the future. That sounds
Yeah.
great. But like all things happen within my experience, my mom had a lot. She was on the phone with somebody, and this was a couple of years after that, though. So things were okay. But a
Right.
couple of years after, she was on the phone with somebody. I didn't think she was talking to me. She was. And she lost it. She started screaming while talking to this person on the phone. And then she bumped me and threatened to like hit me.
Yeah.
So then I left. Didn't respond in like the best manner after that. And I was like, hey, I'm leaving. So then me and Christina
Yeah.
find a place just before we're gonna get married. Like, we have to leave because, well, at least I do. I was like, because if it's gonna get that to the point of physical stuff, like I have to get
Right.
out of here. There's no
Right.
way
Right.
I can stay here. And So then my parents were like, oh, well, if you're gonna leave, and also Christina's gonna live with me, and my parents are kind of super religious. They're like, oh, that's the worst thing. I was like, that's
Yeah.
the worst thing than us getting into a fight. That's a little weird to
Yeah.
me, but so they're like, well, if you have to do this, then you have to pay us back for the school we paid for.
Oh goodness.
So that was like, I was like, no, I'm not doing that. So, well, you're gonna, and I found out about this later. The reason why my dad said that they did that or tried to get me to pay back the money was because I was going to live with Christina just before we were going to get married, because we were going to live quote unquote in sin.
Oh goodness.
So I'm like, my dad basically told on himself,
Yeah.
and that was one of the things he said while we were talking just before the estrangement. So then I was like, oh, so all the things are coming out now. Um, um, so they kind of tried to ruin the wedding. Everybody knew, kind of figured out about it because my wife kind of told people. So then my parents are kind of persona non grata at the wedding. My mom was upset about that. Like, nobody's talking to me. It's like, why would anybody talk to you?
Right.
Everybody knows what's going on. You even
Yeah.
threatened not to go. I was told my dad I would rather not come. That would be great. Um, so it it was a series of things that kind of were connected, but kind of not. So then after
Sure.
the wedding, I stopped talking to my parents. Then I was like, I'm not talking to them. Then my dad reached out about a year and a half later.
Yeah.
We talked for a little bit. He said, all right, things are going to be different. Things are going to be okay. And then this happened just before we were going to tell my parents, hey, we're pregnant.
Yeah.
Um, so it was a lot of the stuff that happened before just drudged up again. Um, so yeah, it's unfortunate. It just is what it is. At
Yeah.
this point, I kind of was like, well, um, I guess is the kind of the end. So
So how has that affected you? Do you feel like, I mean, good or bad? I mean, obviously you're out of some of the bad situation, but
right,
how do you feel like it's affected your life?
I think in general it's a good thing.
Okay.
Like obviously cutting ties with your family sucks. So I don't think it's the greatest thing. Like as in like I wished it for it or whatever. But um, especially during therapy, the therapist, she was very much like, "Hey, I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but you sounds very toxic, and you probably should like not cut them off totally, but like distance
Right.
yourself a little bit from what you're telling me," as she would say. But
Right.
come to find out, like a lot of my immediate friends and my wife's friends, a lot of them don't have good relationships with their immediate parents either, for varying degrees and reasons.
Sure.
Um, which is interesting. Um, I
It
don't know.
is.
Yeah, I don't know if it might be a millennial versus boomer or Gen X thing. I don't know. Because it's something like I didn't know there was a thing until like learning more about it.
Right.
Of all things, Reddit is a big place where like
Interesting.
uh, yeah, kids like or not kids, but young adults like me will go and you have like just no mail. That's a Reddit post for like people who have issues with their mother-in-laws or father-in-laws
Hmm.
or uh it's like family issues is another one.
Yeah.
I think I like watched one of your videos and there was a mother who mentioned Reddit. She's like, "Oh, I've heard don't go on Reddit." I was like, "Yeah, you probably shouldn't," because there's a lot of
Right.
young adults just bashing.
Well, to a point, you have to be able to do that
Right.
somehow. Do you ever see an end game where you guys might talk again?
I think the only way that would happen, it would have to be a very superficial
Yeah.
um, um, relationship. It has to be real, like a
Yeah.
very basic one.
Almost
Um,
like not a family thing, just a
yeah, and the only reason why I would even entertain that would be because of the grandkids. That's it.
yeah.
But it will also that would have to be supervised because I just don't trust my parents. I just
Well,
trust them around. If they do something to my kid, then that would just be the first and last time. So,
yeah, and you might not you might be in orange after that.
right,
So,
exactly.
I
So
get you.
it's to protect my kids and also to protect them too.
Yeah.
Because I'm a pretty big dude. Like there's like the mama bear slash daddy bear thing that happens even with parents.
Sure.
Even with your own parents. So
So when you tried to talk to them when you were younger, did they listen, or is it just kind of
no,
you're a
no,
kid and you don't know
yeah,
anything?
you just gotta. Yeah, we would have things. We would have discussions, but it would be them talking and me just listening. And if I wanted to say something, it had to be in a certain, uh, like a certain way. Like I couldn't
Right.
say, like, "Hey, I don't agree with this, and this is why." I mean, they didn't really want to hear that.
It was those come to Jesus meetings.
Exactly. Every so often, let's have this long talk. And my dad can talk for hours. He just blah 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 blah. Like so, I was just like, dude, all due respect, let's. What do you want? Like,
Right.
let's get to it. Like, at least my mother would just boom. This is what's going to be.
Yeah.
So, um,
I hear
yeah,
you.
it was like, hey, we're going to talk about this issue or an issue we might have about something, but we don't want you. We want you to hear. We want to kind of hear your opinion, but not really. So, um, and I don't think that's necessarily I don't know. Like I don't know how I feel about that. Like there's
Yeah.
sometimes as a kid, like you need to be told, like you need to do this,
Of
like, and
course.
there is no discussion, right? And there's sometimes where, especially when the kid gets older, like they should have some input,
Yeah.
some. Um,
It's a tough line, and you'll find that out in a few years,
right.
but and find your own way
Yeah.
of dealing with it. But it's definitely a tough line. If there's if you were to ever have another conversation with them, and they had to listen,
Hmm.
I know that's probably tough, but to make them listen. But is there something you would want to tell them that you haven't already?
Uh, no, I think all the discussions we've had, especially now that I've been an adult, has kind of already been said.
Okay.
Um, they either can accept it or not. I think that's kind of what it is.
Yeah. Y-
I think even though my parents still treat me like obviously I'm their kid, but they still treat me as such as like a
Right.
kid, right? When it benefits them. So and then when I kind of like, I think one of the issues with my parents, and it could be not just an African American thing, but when you question them, it's you're disrespecting me because you're questioning me.
Right.
It's like a big issue amongst African American parents and children. Like if you
Sure.
question them off like at any point, especially if it's something that is a little touchy, um,
Sure.
then it's an issue. Um, so that was like a big thing for them. Like, hey, if you're questioning us on certain things, you're disrespecting us or whatever, and especially in a situation where we're dealing with estrangement, like, hey, we're going to have a serious conversation about some things, and you're not going to like some things I have to say.
Yeah.
But I'm not trying to disrespect you. I'm trying to make it better.
Yeah.
Um, at least trying to, at least. Um, yeah, I think all I've said, there's nothing more to say to them other than like, hey,
Okay. And you mentioned therapy earlier.
mhm.
So I think you started that in college. Is that
Yes,
all you said? Yeah.
yep,
And that's worked well for you. I know some people it either works and is well, and
mhm.
you have a good therapist, or it's the opposite.
Right,
So,
right.
um, but your
Uh,
experience was good with that.
yeah, it was great. I think one of I had commented on one of your videos because one of their somebody else you were interviewing said like, oh, the therapist like kind of just like messed up our relationship even more.
Right.
And I kind of commented on that
Yeah.
a little bit, not to be malicious or
No,
anything like
you
that.
weren't at all, and I appreciate that. I have had a few comments here and there that were a lot more bitey.
Yeah,
So, and which is fine as long as you're respectful. There's
right,
opinion,
right.
so
Because I've heard this from like older the older generation, like, oh, the therapist, we had the family therapy, and the therapy more or less blew it up.
right,
Um, I mean, a therapist's job is not to necessarily unify. The therapist's job is to find where's the problem, let's fix the problem
yeah,
with what the information they know, right? So if your kid
right,
is lying, then or is a bad person, then we have an issue. And then you also, like you said,
right.
we have therapists who are just bad people. So we have therapists who shouldn't
Of
be
course,
therapists.
of course.
Um, But all things be equal, if you have a decent therapist, the therapist sees a problem, and the therapist is like, "Hey, like, mom and dad, like, you're mostly the issue. We got to fix this." Or,
Right,
or the other side. I rarely see therapists talk to children because a lot of therapists will say, including mine, that I haven't seen her in a while, but who I have seen. More or less, it starts from the top. Like you guys are supposed to be the leaders.
right.
If your kid, now again, kids have agency, especially if they're adults. So like,
Yeah,
if like, I don't want to be like kids don't have or adult children have no agency because they do. Um, but a lot of times, um, if there's an issue, like it starts from the top. Let's all try to fix this together. And if we can't, then we
right,
can't.
right.
And my therapist was she definitely like open eyes to some things like, that doesn't seem right.
Yeah,
What your mom and dad are doing is kind of iffy. Like it
yeah,
sounds like you have an extended family. Your extended family has issues, which is affecting you too. I found later on, like talking to some of my extended family that are decent.
yeah.
How my mom grew up, and she has five brothers and one sister, so like seven children.
Wow.
And how like I learned a little bit more about that dynamic. Like my grandfather, who I've never met, he died when my mom was 15 from a car accident.
Mm,
But her oldest brother is actually they found out when my mom's the second oldest. So
yeah.
her older brother, come to find out, was her half brother.
Oh,
So they found that out, like, and so there was tumultuous stuff already happening between
yeah.
my grandfather and my grandmother, but they stayed obviously because of societal pressure. I think they kept that a secret too.
I'm
Um,
sure.
and then they had subsequently after my half uncle, her half brother. 4 brothers, and 1 sister. And then my grandfather, sorry, dies in a car accident when she's 15. And then my grandmother becomes an alcoholic, which I think kind of pushed her Alzheimer's and all that because she was a serious alcoholic.
Mm.
Like it was really bad to the
Yeah.
point where my the second oldest uncle, he moved out the house when he could. The other couple other ones got into like became like drug dealers and all types of wild stuff. Then my
Wow.
grandma loses the house because of that. Then they go into the military, but the military didn't do as much for them. I think some of them deal with some sort of mental illness too.
Yeah.
Some of them, and it was chaos. So I think my mom grew up in a lot of chaos,
Yeah. Sounds
amongst other
like it.
things. Which then it gives me a perspective like, okay, yeah, why you're angry.
Yeah.
I get it.
At least you can understand to a point. You don't have to personally put up with it, but
Right.
you
But like
know,
I see like, okay, I get why if you grew up in some sort of chaos like that.
so
Yeah, I will say I think that should be like the last resort, the cut
right.
off with no explanation.
Yeah.
Um I've heard some adult, like again, listening to your channel. The reason why I even like I got suggested your channel from YouTube because
Cool.
of some of the stuff I like listen to and watch, like Dr. Romney with narcissistic abuse and all that type of stuff. So there's
Yeah.
some dynamics within my own growing up that my mother kind of mirrors with no, like I'm not again not a therapist, but things that she would do.
Yeah.
We're like, huh, interesting. There's a couple other people I'll listen to, and so your channel popped up.
Cool.
But and the word toxic, like you said, I think is overused.
Yeah.
But yeah, if there's a therapist that off the rip, if you have the first thing you come into their office and they're like, oh, just cut them off with no explanation, that's weird.
Yeah.
I will say, although again, I'm not on the other side with the parents who are estranged, but I do think that kids are telling parents, they're just not listening, or they're telling them in ways that they don't seem to see.
Yeah.
Um, uh, but I can't go into detail because obviously
Sure.
I'm not in those situations. But I will tell parents like, hey, like if your kid cuts you off and with no explanation, I think they probably did say something to you at some point.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe not into like the biggest of details. Maybe they were afraid, like to say something because you're the parent, they're the kid. But
Sure.
I don't know. Again, I just when I hear that I question it sometimes. Like, I think they might have said something to you.
Yeah.
You
And
just
I'm
probably
sure there are instances that that's true.
right,
I'm sure there are. I
right.
mean, people just peer to peers, we don't talk the same way.
And
So
yeah, like you said, I think that I will say for like children who are strange, like at least give some sort of explanation.
yeah.
Don't like leave your parents in the dark. Because then it can't be fixed, or they can't be like it can't. If they
Right.
want to fix it, they can. If they won't fix it, they won't. But at least they know. I
Exactly.
mean, unless you're in like a situation where your parents are just horrible people, right? You're like,
Right.
I don't even want to explain anything to you. But I don't think that's necessarily the case in a lot of these instances.
Right.
I think whether there's obviously a gradation and a scale of what you're dealing with,
Yeah.
and I think at least letting them know, maybe even a letter. I think that's passive aggressive in my opinion. But
Yeah.
even that, it's like, here, I'll send you something in the mail about my grievances.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how you feel about it. I don't like the letter thing. I think either calling or in person is better. But
It's definitely better. The letters, I mean, I can see it if that's the only way. But it's almost like in a text or an email and whatever too, you can't hear the person's tone.
mhm,
You can't respond to them, so it's which is sometimes good and bad,
true.
um but yeah, I get what you're saying. I think it's better to be able to be either on the phone or in person, at least trying, if you're
Right.
going to try to do that. I mean, if there's no other way, then like you said, here's your grievances, here's what you did to me, or here's what I think you did, or here's how
Right.
I perceived it, whatever.
Mhm.
And then if they want to work on it, either side, if they want to work on it,
Right.
then they have that opportunity. So,
Yeah.
um, well, I mean, it sounds like you've given it, obviously, it's not just a, oh, you made me mad, mom,
Right.
kind of thing. So,
Right.
um, so you've given it a lot of thought, and you're obviously got, um, you got your reasons, and they sound very, very valid. I think hearing from um one of our adult children might help people.
Yeah.
Obviously there are some people that are going to say, oh well, Phil's just this or that, and
Right.
that's whatever.
That's fine. Right.
But you just don't know. There's going to be one person out there that in your same community maybe,
Mhm.
or had the same alcoholic parent, or whatever,
Mhm.
uh, that just sees, oh, maybe that's what's going on. So
Right.
I really appreciate you being willing and being respectful.
Oh, yeah.
I think, at least in my experience doing this so far, and hearing other parents anyway, obviously I don't hear their kids, but hearing other
Mhm.
parents, it doesn't always sound that way. So it's
Right.
it's it's important to hear somebody's other side, and but then at the same time not be like, oh, all parents are horrible, kind
Right.
of thing. So
Right.
so I appreciate it though.
Yeah.
um
Because when I posted a comment on one of your videos, I thought about it long and hard, because one, this is a platform for parents, right? Who
right.
their kids are estranged. So it's like, well, it's not necessarily my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
I'm on the other side, and I wanted to make sure that whatever I commented on or posted, that it would be tasteful, thoughtful, and not like accusatory,
Sure.
because everybody's situation is different.
No, and
Uh,
it wasn't. And the funny thing was, Phil, I had just been talking to friends of mine, who other parents, about potentially talking to an estranged kid, and seeing their side, because like I said, I just think that having more information is better.
right.
And if you can't talk to your kid, maybe you can hear from this other kid. I know you're 30, but
Yep.
the other kid, and see if that helps you. So it was kind of ironic that you did, and yeah, you were incredibly respectful. So that's why I appreciate it. And to go on top of that, I actually started, I can send you the link if you'd like,
Sure.
another private Facebook group that is for all family,
Okay.
of estrangement, so that, you never know. Maybe
Right.
um, I just, for whatever reason, I know some of them will never be healed, but
Right.
if they're those ones that are just silly misunderstandings,
Hmm.
that are just, oh, I disrespected my parent and now they're mad at me, or vice versa,
Hmm.
then maybe some of those things can be healed, and heal these families. Because,
Right.
I know you had to do things to protect you and your family, but I'm sure you'd like to have a regular parental relationship.
Of course. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Who wouldn't?
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So, and you want to be an example to your kids. So,
Of course. Yeah.
which you are being, by taking care of what you need to. So,
Yeah.
but I appreciate it. Is there any final thoughts you want to share with everybody that we haven't talked about already?
Um. Uh. Well, I think you've touched on this in a couple of your videos, but like how estrangement does affect a lot of everyone in the family too. So again,
Yeah.
like I have my younger brother, and he's kind of like my father in that he wants everybody to get along. Uh, and he knows generally what's going on. And I kind
Yeah.
of try to tell him like, hey, like it's not going to happen the way you want it to.
Right.
So just that being said, like it doesn't. It's I will say this: I don't think a lot of, and as I mentioned before, like a lot of either me or my wife's friends don't have the best relationship with their parents. Like the decisions we were making aren't taken lightly. It's not something we were like, oh, just cut off the family and that's it. Like it's
Right.
not. That's not. It's one. It's not a natural thing to do,
Yeah.
and it's not something that is. Yeah, it's not easy. I just think that there's a shifting dynamic in like what we now know what is abusive, what is not abusive, what could be toxic versus what it used to be. Like I think there's a lot
Right.
of things that are shifting. I don't necessarily think it's all good, but I do think there is um kind of an awakening of like what you as a person should deal with in a reasonable manner
Sure.
and what type of boundaries you need to put up. But um, it does affect everyone. I definitely knew like this was going to affect my younger brother a lot. So um, uh, it's one of the reasons why I kind of even stayed around the family, my parents, because I didn't want them to uh, kind of screw my younger brother over, and and to that point, I think they've kind of crippled him
Yeah.
a little bit. Although just graduated law school and some other things, but he's socially crippled
Yeah.
in some things, and I love him to death. But there's some things like read the room.
Yeah. I hear you.
But yeah, I don't think this is something we take. At least me. I'll say me. I don't take it lightly.
Yeah.
I didn't take it lightly. It wasn't something that I wanted. And but yeah, I will say for adults out there, if your kids like cut you off, like they've thought about it
Okay.
for a while. Generally, I don't know. I haven't heard a story of a kid say, my parent did this to me and it's cut them off. And if that's the case, then something's wrong with that child.
Sure.
There's something they got to deal with.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. And congratulations on your upcoming little one. Do you know if it's boy or girl?
It's a boy. So
awesome.
Yeah.